The chipped formica of Ethan's desk felt cool under his forearms. It was Sean Ethan, the blue light of the monitors painting his face in shifting shades. 3 days, 70 yen, 2 hours. He'd been chasing this ghost in the machine. And the ghost was winning clarity. The facial recognition software, poised to be Novatech's flagship product, was displaying a sure error rate on controlled tests. 12%. In the world of biometrics, that wasn't just a bug, it was a professional death sentence. He'd rewritten the algorithms 3 times, optimized the neural network, even calibrated the testing parameters. Nothing. The software consistently misidentified subjects, flagged false positives, and occasionally simply refused to recognize a face at all. He scrolled through the code again, a dizzying cascade of Python and C++. It should have been elegant, streamlined. Dr. Aris Thorne, Novatech's founder and a legend in the field, had personally overseen the architectural design. The problem wasn't a flaw in Thorne's design principles. Ethan was almost certain of it. It was something foreign within the code, something extra. He'd been tracing a particularly frustrating error, a recursive loop in the object detection module, when he'd stumbled on it. A function call buried deep within the core libraries. Project Nightingale. The name itself was an oddity. Clarity's development had been meticulously documented. Every module named with clinical precisions in Object Tracker thou-fi. Feature Extractor Stable, Recognition Engine I-alpha. Nightingale felt different, organic. Like it hadn't been born in a lab, Ethan doubled and clicked, bringing up the function's definition. It was obfuscated, heavily layered with encryption he hadn't seen used anywhere else in the project. But he was good at this. He'd built his reputation on reverse engineering. He started peeling back the layers line by line. It wasn't strictly a part of Clarity. That was immediately clear. Nightingale operated independently. Accessing the camera input 40B40 reached Clarity's recognition engine. It was tapping into the raw feed, processing it with a separate, unknown algorithm. Then, what the code didn't clearly indicate. It simply logged data 40 timestamps, coordinates, and a confidence level. A confidence level in Fivinwadi was the real question. A cold knot tightened in Ethan's stomach. The privacy implications alone were staggering. Clarity, as it was marketed, was designed to identify individuals tiving after they opted into the system. Nightingale circumvented that entirely. It was a silent observer, scanning faces without consent. He moved to the project directory, expecting to find documentation, design specs, func something nothing. The folder contained only Nightingale's core code and a handful of encrypted data logs. "This is insane," he muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. He pulled up Dr. Thorne's personnel file, core team member. No mention of Nightingale. He checked the project's official roadmap, the board meeting minutes, the internal communication logs, a complete blank. It was as if Nightingale had been secreted into the system, a shadow program operating in the dark. His chair swiveled as Maya, her wild curls escaping her top knot, materialized beside his desk, a travel mug steaming in her hand. "Still at it, Ethan? You look like you haven't slept since Tuesday." "I haven't," he admitted. "I think I found something weird." He explained, carefully outlining the anomaly, the hidden function, the lack of documentation. Maya listened patiently, her expression shifting from concern to skepticism. "Ethan, you're stressed. Clarity is a big deal. Everyone's on edge." She took a sip of her coffee. "Thorne is a bit eccentric. Maybe this is some internal tool he has been experimenting with, a pet project he didn't want to broadcast, but it bypasses all the privacy protocols." Ethan argued, "It is accessing the camera feed directly. That is a huge red flag." Maya shrugged. "Maybe he has a good reason. He is the genius, remember. He gets to do genius things, but it is not documented anywhere. It is like it was deliberately hidden." "You're seeing ghosts, Ethan. Seriously, go home, get some sleep. You're probably just reading the code wrong." She squeezed his shoulder. "Don't go poking around where you don't belong, okay? Thorne doesn't like people questioning his methods." Her words should have been reassuring, but they felt like a warning. Maya was a pragmatist, fiercely loyal to the company and Dr. Thorne. She wasn't interested in disruptive questions. He couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't taking him seriously. Or worse, that Shisunuwasu taking him seriously and telling him to drop it. "Okay," he said, forcing a smile. "You're probably right." He watched her walk back to her desk, the click of her heels echoing in the hushed office. He turned back to his screen, but the code now seemed to leer at him, filled with hidden intent. He ran a quick diagnostic sweep of the network, looking for any indication of unauthorized access. Nothing, everything appeared normal. Too normal. He needed more data. He needed to understand what Nightingale was actually doing with the camera feeds. He regen-initiated the function, focusing its analysis on a publicly accessible webcam streaming live footage from a coffee shop across town. The confidence level climbed steadily, reporting a value of 5%. On the coffee shop's exterior. That made no sense. Nightingale wasn't identifying foodie people in the feed. It was calibrating against the environment. He dove deeper, initiating a trace on the data packets leaving Nightingale. The destination was what stopped his breath, an external IP address, not a Novatech server, not a partner's network. Something completely outside the company firewall. He tapped into the network traffic analyzer, overlaying the IP address onto a geolocation map. The pinpoint landed not within the city limits, not even within the state. It was rural Maine, a remote wooded area. No registered businesses, no residential addresses. Just empty space. He ran a deeper analysis, decrypting the outgoing data stream, a growing sense of dread coiling in his gut. He initially assumed it was encrypted data, sensor readings, or diagnostic information. But as the decryption algorithm completed, a video feed flickered onto his auxiliary monitor. It wasn't the coffee shop. It was a live camera feed, pointed directly at his apartment building. He zoomed in, heart hammering against his ribs. The camera was focused on the entrance, capturing the faces of everyone entering and leaving. He felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck, the undeniable feeling of being watched. He slowly turned his head, scanning the darkened office. Empty still. The only sound was the hum of the servers and the frantic thumping of his own pulse. But he knew, with chilling certainty, that he wasn't alone. The chipped formica felt colder now, radiating a chill that had nothing to do with the office temperature. Ethan hadn't moved from his desk in 8 hours, fueled by lukewarm coffee and a growing sense of panic. The feed from the camera outside his apartment building still looped silently on his auxiliary monitor. A stark reminder of the violation. He'd spent the interim tracing the network of external cameras Nightingale was connected to. The results were disturbing. It wasn't random. The cameras weren't focused on vulnerable targets or potential threats. They were aimed at power. The Capitol building, the Supreme Court, the headquarters of several major financial institutions, and scattered amongst these bastions of authority, the private residences of senators, CEOs, and media moguls. He'd mapped them all, a constellation of surveillance points illuminating the landscape of American influence. Nightingale wasn't just watching. It was observing the observers, monitoring the puppeteers. "This is beyond creepy," he murmured, highlighting a camera trained on the Georgetown home of Senator Caldwell, chair of the Intelligence Committee. "This isn't about security. It is about control." He dove deeper into the code, searching for any clue about the purpose of this vast network. He discovered encrypted communication protocols embedded within Nightingale's architecture, designed for secure data transfer and remote control. It wasn't a passive observation system. It was a clandestine network capable of receiving instructions and potentially delivering them. Ethan, he didn't jump, but his muscles tensed. Maya stood beside his desk, her expression a mixture of concern and exhaustion. She'd clearly been working late too. Her eyes, usually bright and energetic, were shadowed with fatigue. "I saw the light on," she said softly. "You haven't left. What is going on?" He hesitated. He hadn't wanted to involve her, fearing the repercussions, but he couldn't do this alone. I've found more. It is worse than I thought." He walked her through his findings, displaying the camera map, explaining the encrypted communication protocols. Maya listened in silence, her skepticism gradually giving way to alarm. "Okay," she said finally, her voice tight. "This isn't a company pet project. This is something else entirely. I need your help," Ethan said, feeling a desperate surge of relief. You're the best network security expert we have. I need you to break the encryption, figure out who Nightingale is communicating with. Maya nodded, her professional instincts kicking in. Let's do it. But we have to be careful. If Thorne finds out we're digging into this. She spent the next several hours working alongside him, her fingers flying across the keyboard, weaving through layers of code. Her expertise was invaluable. While Ethan focused on identifying the network structure, Maya cracked the encryption keys, revealing a complex web of shell corporations and offshore accounts. The trail eventually led to a single entity, Aurora Investments, a privately held firm registered in the Cayman Islands. Aurora had no listed employees, no physical address, and a deliberately opaque corporate structure. This is textbook money laundering, Maya said, tracing the financial flow. Aurora is funneling money to a dozen different holding companies, all of which are connected to Julian Devereaux. The name hit Ethan like a physical blow, Julian Devereaux. A reclusive billionaire with a reputation for eccentric philanthropy and shadowy dealings. He was a major benefactor of several defense contractors, a key player in the military-industrial complex, and a man who operated entirely outside the public eye. Devereaux, Ethan repeated. Incredulous. What would he want with a surveillance network like this? I don't know, Maya admitted. But something about this feels wrong, like we're looking at the tip of an iceberg. As if to punctuate her words, an email popped up on Ethan's screen. It appeared to be a notification from the HR department, requesting him to update his payroll information. The link looked legitimate, mirroring the company's official email template. Don't click it, Maya warned, her voice sharp. It is a phishing attempt. Ethan hadn't even considered the possibility. He'd been so focused on the code, the network, the implications, that he'd forgotten the most basic security protocols. They know we're looking, he said, his voice barely a whisper. They're trying to get access to our systems. Maya quickly quarantined the email and ran a scan of his computer, detecting evidence of a staged exploit attempt. Someone had been specifically targeting him, attempting to install a keylogger or malware. They're good, Maya said grimly. Very good. Whoever is behind this has resources. They continued their investigation, but the atmosphere in the office had shifted. The hushed silence had been replaced by a palpable tension. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat. Every sound echoed with suspicion. Working through the night, they uncovered a series of anomalies within the encrypted communication logs. The data wasn't simply being collected and transmitted. It was being used. Nightingale wasn't recording events. It was appearing to anticipate them. Specifically, they found log entries tracing a series of seemingly unrelated incidents. A minor stock market fluctuation, a delayed flight, a political donation, all of which appeared to have been subtly influenced by actions taken sender in response to data captured by Nightingale. Look at this, Maya said, her voice trembling. The system flagged a potential protest at a senator's fundraiser. 24 hours later, the senator announced a last-minute scheduling conflict. Ethan scrolled through the logs, finding similar patterns. A negative news article about a CEO was preceded by a series of orchestrated social media posts, discrediting the source. A crucial vote in Congress was swayed by a carefully timed leak of damaging information. It is not just surveillance, Ethan said, his mind reeling. It is manipulation. Nightingale isn't just watching the game, it is playing it. The realization hung heavy in the air, a chilling testament to the power of the network they'd uncovered. They'd stumbled upon something far bigger, far more dangerous than they could have imagined. They weren't simply investigating a breach of privacy. They were unraveling a conspiracy that reached the highest echelons of power. And they had no idea who was pulling the strings. The flickering fluorescent lights of the Novatech office felt oppressive, reflecting the turmoil churning inside Ethan. The weight of Nightingale pressed down on him, not just as a technological threat, but as a haunting echo of his past. He hadn't spoken about his father in years, burying the grief and resentment under layers of professional ambition. Now staring into the abyss of this clandestine surveillance program, he couldn't ignore the parallels any longer. His father, David Riley, had been a mid-level analyst for the NSA, a quiet, meticulous man, devoted to his work and his family. Ethan remembered childhood evenings filled with his father's explanations of cryptography, the beauty of secure communication, a sense of naive trust in the system. Then came the whispers, accusations of unethical data collection, warrantless surveillance, programs designed to monitor American citizens. David, horrified by what he discovered, had tried to blow the whistle. He'd compiled a detailed report outlining the illegal activities and presented it to his superiors. The response wasn't gratitude or reform. It was swift and brutal. He was ostracized, labeled a troublemaker, a paranoid conspiracy theorist. His security clearance was revoked, his career ruined. Ethan's mother had found a new job, renting a small apartment, constantly looking over her shoulder. The atmosphere was thick with anxiety and fear. Then, 6 months later, his father died officially. It was a heart attack. But Ethan, even as a child, remembered the unanswered questions, the too quick dismissal of any foul play, the subtle warnings from family friends to let it go. The memory slammed into him raw and visceral, a childhood photo on his desk. David's earnest face, smiling back at him, suddenly seemed to carry a look of prescience. He'd lived his life with a deep-seated distrust of authority, a cautious skepticism born from witnessing his father's destruction. He'd deliberately chosen a career in the private sector precisely to avoid the suffocating control of the government. And here it was, Nightingale, a system that mirrored his father's warnings with chilling accuracy, a program that exploited the very vulnerabilities David had tried to expose. The similarities were undeniable. The clandestine nature, the scope of the surveillance, the blatant disregard for privacy. He closed his eyes, running a hand through his already disheveled hair. It wasn't a coincidence. Something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. "You okay?" Maya's voice broke through his reverie. She looked genuinely concerned. He forced a weak smile. "Just thinking about my father." He didn't tell her the whole story. Not yet. It felt too fragile, too personal. Instead, he explained, in broad strokes, about David's work, his attempt to expose illegal surveillance practices. His untimely death, that is. "Wow," Maya said, her gaze softening with understanding. "That is a lot. No wonder you're so cautious." "I need to talk to someone who might understand this," Ethan said. "Someone who has seen this kind of thing before." He remembered old Ben Carter, a retired investigative journalist who had been a close friend of his father's. Ben had covered the story of David's downfall, tirelessly pursuing leads and raising awareness, even after the mainstream media had lost interest. He'd been a rock for Ethan and his mother in the aftermath of his father's death. Ben now lived a quiet life in a small town upstate, but Ethan hoped he'd be willing to listen. He found Ben tending his garden, his weathered face beaming with welcome. He listened patiently as Ethan recounted his findings, the story of Nightingale unfolding like a dark prophecy. "It is the same playbook," Ben said, grimly shaking his head. "They always use the same playbook: deny, discredit, destroy." "What do we do?" Ethan asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "Be careful," Ben warned, his eyes filled with a weary wisdom. "Whoever is behind this has power, influence, and a willingness to use it. They won't hesitate to silence anyone who threatens their operation." He paused, his gaze unwavering. "Don't trust anyone, assume you're being watched, and document everything." The conversation left Ethan feeling even more unsettled. Ben's words weren't reassuring. They were a chilling confirmation of his worst fears. Leaving Ben's house, Ethan noticed a car he hadn't seen before. A black, unmarked sedan parked across the street. He dismissed it as paranoia, a byproduct of his heightened anxiety. But as he drove back towards the city, he noticed it again, following him, maintaining a discreet distance, but always present. He tried to lose it, weaving through traffic, taking circuitous routes. The black car mirrored his every move, a silent, ominous shadow. He glanced in his rearview mirror, adrenaline surging. His father's death flashed through his mind. Coincidence, or something far more sinister? Back at Novatech, the office was almost empty. Maya was still at her desk, hunched over her computer, analyzing the shell corporations linked to Aurora Investments. "Anything?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Maya looked up, her face pale. "You're not going to believe this." She swiveled her monitor towards him. A log file stared back at them, detailing a remote access attempt to her computer. Someone had bypassed Novatech's security protocols and gained complete control of her system. "They were in here," she said, her voice trembling. They copied every file I had on Project Nightingale, every document, every line of code, every analysis. Ethan felt a cold dread grip his heart. They weren't just being watched, they were being targeted, and whoever was behind it was moving fast. Closing in the black car, he realized wasn't just following him. It was a warning, a promise, a signal that their investigation had gone too far. The game had changed, and they were no longer the hunters, they were the hunted. The polished chrome and glass of Alistair Finch's office felt less like a corporate headquarters and more like a fortress. Finch, Novatech's CEO, sat behind a massive mahogany desk, his expression unreadable. He was a man sculpted from steel and silence. His gray suit impeccably tailored, his eyes devoid of warmth. Ethan and Maya laid out their evidence stymie. The camera map, the decrypted communication logs, the financial trail linking Nightingale to Julian Devereaux. They presented it all with methodical precision, hoping to appeal to Finch's sense of reason, his corporate responsibility. "This is a rogue program, Mr. Finch," Ethan said, his voice amplified by a nervous tremor. "It is operating outside the scope of clarity, bypassing all privacy protocols. It is a massive security breach and a potential legal catastrophe." Finch listened in silence, occasionally adjusting his tie or tapping a pen against his desk. When Ethan finished, he steepled his fingers and regarded them with a chilling detachment. "I assure you, Mr. Riley. Miss Sharma, I am as surprised by these allegations as you are," he said, his voice smooth and carefully modulated. "I have no knowledge of this Project Nightingale. Novatech operates with the highest ethical standards. We respect the privacy of our users." "But the evidence," Maya started, pointing to the data displayed on the holographic projector. Finch waved a dismissive hand. "Circumstantial, at best, cleverly fabricated, perhaps. I'm sure a thorough internal investigation will reveal this to be a misunderstanding." Ethan stared at him, incredulous. "A misunderstanding? We've traced this program to a shell corporation owned by Julian Devereaux. We have proof that it is actively manipulating events." Finch's gaze hardened. "Mr. Devereaux is a valued investor in Novatech. His contributions have been instrumental to our success. I will not entertain unsubstantiated accusations against him." He paused, his eyes boring into Ethan. "I suspect you two have been misled. Perhaps you've been the victims of industrial espionage. Or perhaps you're simply trying to sabotage a product that threatens your own careers." It was a blatant dismissal, a calculated attempt to discredit them. Ethan felt a surge of anger, a simmering resentment that mirrored the one his father had likely felt years ago. "We're not trying to sabotage anything," Ethan said, his voice rising. "We're trying to expose a dangerous program that is violating the fundamental rights of millions of people." Before Finch could respond, the office door slid shut with a pneumatic hiss. A moment later, Gregor Finch, his chief of security, a hulking man with a shaved head and a permanent scowl, entered the room, accompanied by 2 armed guards. "Please escort Mr. Riley and Miss Sharma off the premises," Finch instructed, his voice devoid of emotion. "What, you're shutting us out?" Maya demanded, her voice incredulous. "You're covering this up." Gregor stepped forward, his hand resting on his sidearm. "That is an order." Ethan and Maya exchanged a panicked glance. They were being detained. The company wasn't investigating, it was containing. "We need to get this information out," Ethan murmured to Maya. "To the press, to the authorities." They managed to discreetly send a coded message to a contact at the Washington Post-Study, outlining their findings and requesting a secure channel for information transfer. But within seconds, Gregor's security team intercepted the transmission. "Nice try," Gregor said, displaying the intercepted message on his tablet. "All communications are being monitored." They were completely cut off, trapped. As Gregor and his guards prepared to escort them out, Ethan realized they weren't just being contained, they were being isolated. He quickly scanned the room, his eyes landing on a hidden security camera tucked into a corner of the ceiling. "He is watching us," Ethan said, his voice low. "Finch is watching us right now." He surreptitiously accessed the camera feed through a smartwatch, hijacking the signal. The screen flickered, then displayed a live, real-time view of the office, including a secondary monitor Finch had been concealing behind his desk. On that monitor, a familiar interface glowed: Project Nightingale. Finch wasn't just denying knowledge of the program. He was actively using it, monitoring their every move. A chilling realization struck Ethan. Finch wasn't a victim of Nightingale. He was its master. He is in control. Maya whispered, her voice filled with dread. "We need to disable it," Ethan said, desperation clawing at his throat, "before it is too late." He remembered a failsafe he'd built into Clarity's core code, a last-resort emergency shutdown sequence. It was designed to prevent unauthorized access, but it could also be used to disable Nightingale, if he could reach it. He wrestled with Gregor and one of the guards, managing to break free long enough to access his laptop. He frantically typed in the override code, his fingers flying across the keyboard. The system recognized his inputs, initiating the shutdown sequence. "What are you doing?" Gregor roared, lunging for him. "Ending this," Ethan grunted, his focus solely on the screen. The screen displayed a cascading series of error messages, indicating the system was powering down. Nightingale was going offline. He'd done it, but then a new alert flashed across the screen. A critical system failure, a cascade of errors. The shutdown sequence hadn't just disabled Nightingale. It had triggered a complete system-wide collapse. "What is happening?" Maya asked, her voice trembling. Ethan stared at the screen, horror dawning on his face. He'd forgotten about the integrated systems. Novatech's Clarity infrastructure wasn't just used for facial recognition. It powered the life support systems at St. Jude's Hospital, a major medical facility located just a few miles from the office. A news alert popped up on his smartwatch. Emergency services were reporting a complete power outage at St. Jude's. Critical patients were at risk. He tried to disable a surveillance program, and he'd inadvertently put lives in danger. He'd intended to be a whistleblower, like his father. He'd aimed to expose the truth. Instead, he just made everything infinitely worse. The news broadcasts were a relentless onslaught of blame and recrimination. "Novatech software malfunction causes hospital crisis," screamed one headline. "Power outage leaves patients critical," declared another. Ethan barely registered the words. Numb with guilt, the sterile white of Maya's temporary safe house, Timone, cramped apartment above a laundromat Thibby, seemed to mock him, a visual representation of his failure. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. Haunted by images of darkened hospital rooms and the faces of the patients whose lives hung in the balance. He'd believed he was fighting for privacy, for freedom, but his actions had resulted in collateral damage he could never have foreseen. "It wasn't your fault," Maya said softly, handing him a lukewarm cup of coffee. She'd been tirelessly working the phones, trying to gather information, to find a way to mitigate the damage. She looked exhausted, but her resolve hadn't wavered. Finch knew the risks. He didn't care. "I should have thought it through," Ethan said, his voice thick with despair. "I should have anticipated the cascading failure. I was so focused on Nightingale." "We were both focused," Maya corrected, "and we both found something that someone powerful wanted to keep hidden." They were fugitives now, hunted by Novatech security, aided by their considerable resources, and increasingly by unidentified federal agents. They'd abandoned their apartments, their cars, their lives. They traveled under assumed names, communicating through encrypted channels, constantly looking over their shoulders. Thankfully, Sarah Chen, the former Washington Post journalist they'd contacted, had come through. She'd secured them the safe house and provided them with burner phones and limited financial assistance. Sarah was a seasoned reporter, relentless and resourceful. She confirmed that her editors were preparing a major exposé on Novatech and Nightingale, but warned them that proceeding would be dangerous. "Finch has friends in high places," she'd cautioned. "Powerful friends who will do anything to protect their interests." They spent the day poring over the data they'd managed to salvage, desperately searching for a vulnerability, a way to permanently disable Nightingale and expose those responsible. What they found was even more disturbing than they'd imagined. Finch hadn't simply relied on the system's core architecture. He'd built a secret contingency plan, a Phoenix protocol designed to automatically restore Nightingale in the event of a shutdown. The protocol was triggered by a hidden server located offsite, a secure data center registered to a dummy corporation in Switzerland. It bypassed all of Ethan's modifications, initiating a complete system rollback. "He anticipated this," Maya said, her voice laced with fury. "He knew someone might try to disable it. He planned for it. And he has the resources to pull it off," Ethan added, He is not just a CEO, he is connected to something bigger. Their investigation led them to a series of encrypted transactions, traced back to an offshore account held by Alistair Finch. The funds originated from a private equity firm, Harbinger Holdings, with close ties to several prominent defense contractors and a network of shadowy lobbying groups. But the beneficial owner of Harbinger Holdings remained hidden behind layers of shell corporations. A name kept surfacing, whispered among sources, a legend in the world of covert operations. General Theron Vance, retired head of special operations, now a highly influential security consultant. Vance, Maya breathed, scrolling through articles detailing Vance's controversial career. He is notorious. Accusations of black ops, illegal arms deals. He is a ghost. Ethan felt a cold dread creep into his bones. He'd unknowingly stumbled into a web of conspiracy that extended far beyond a rogue software program. Nightingale wasn't just about surveillance, it was about control, manipulation, and the unchecked power of a hidden elite. "We need to get this information to Sarah," Ethan said, grabbing his burner phone. "She needs to know about Vance." He dialed Sarah's number, his heart pounding in his chest. The phone rang, then went straight to voicemail. He tried again and again. Each time, the same result. Something was wrong. Maya checked her sources. A quick search revealed an alarming headline: "Prominent journalist found dead in apparent suicide." Sarah Chen was dead. The article described a scene staged to look like a suicide heavy A note, an empty bottle of sleeping pills. But Maya immediately recognized the hallmarks of a professional cover-up. Sarah was a meticulous journalist, a fighter. She wouldn't have taken her own life. "They got to her," Maya whispered, her voice trembling. "They silenced her." Ethan stared at the screen, his blood turning to ice. They were running out of time. The net was closing in, and the people behind Nightingale were willing to kill to protect their secrets. The hospital crisis, Finch's contingency plans, General Vance. It wasn't just a conspiracy anymore. It was a war, and they were hopelessly outgunned. He had unleashed something far beyond his control, and he was beginning to wonder if he and Maya were already too late to stop it. The rain lashed against the windows of the motel, mirroring the storm brewing inside Ethan. Sarah's death had shifted everything. It wasn't just about exposing a surveillance program anymore. It was about avenging a friend and confronting a ruthless enemy. Maya, surprisingly calm despite the gravity of the situation, had focused on dissecting Sarah's final communications. She was digging into Devereaux's past, Maya said, her fingers flying across the laptop. Specifically, his involvement with a defunct intelligence program called Kronos back in the 90s. Kronos, the name echoed faintly in Ethan's memory. His father had briefly mentioned it, dismissing it as a failed experiment in predictive policing. But Sarah's research suggested it was far more ambitious, and far more disturbing. Kronos had attempted to use advanced algorithms to identify potential threats of I4. They materialized based on predictive analysis of personal data. It was shelved after widespread public outcry. But the core principles, it seemed, were still alive. Devereaux funded Kronos, Maya continued. He provided the initial capital, the technological expertise. He saw its potential. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Nightingale wasn't a rogue program. It was the evolution of Kronos, a perfected system for mass surveillance and social control. And Julian Devereaux was its architect. They knew infiltrating Devereaux's Estate 20 heavily guarded compound, nestled in the remote hills of Montana, was suicidal. But they had no other choice. Armed with forged credentials and a meticulously crafted plan, they slipped past the perimeter security under the cover of darkness. The estate was opulent, a grotesque display of wealth and power, granite walls, towering gates, surveillance cameras everywhere. But Maya, with her network security expertise, was able to bypass the electronic defenses, guiding them towards the heart of the compound. They found it hidden beneath the main house. The main house state of the Art Control Center, bathed in the eerie glow of multiple monitors. Technicians in sterile white coats monitored a complex network of data streams, analyzing real-time information from cameras, sensors, and social media feeds. And at the center of it all stood Julian Devereaux, his face illuminated by the screen. He was older than Ethan had imagined, his features gaunt, his eyes burning with an unsettling intensity. He wasn't too surprised to see them. "I've been expecting you, Mr. Riley," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "And Miss Sharma, I must admit, I am impressed by your persistence." "You killed Sarah Chen," Ethan accused, his voice tight with fury. Devereaux shrugged. "A necessary precaution. She was getting too close to the truth." "The truth," Ethan scoffed. "You are building a digital prison, controlling people's lives based on algorithms and data mining." "I am protecting them," Devereaux countered, his voice rising. "I am ensuring their safety. The world is a dangerous place, Mr. Riley. People need to be guided, protected from threats they don't even understand." He revealed his philosophy, a chilling vision of a perfectly ordered society, governed by predictive algorithms and preemptive intervention. Nightingale wasn't about surveillance. It was about prevention. It wasn't about control. It was about security. It was a radical belief system, fueled by a twisted sense of paternalism and a deep-seated distrust of human nature. "Your father understood this," Devereaux said, his gaze locking with Ethan as he saw the potential of Kronos. "He tried to warn people, but they weren't ready to listen." Ethan's heart lurched. "What are you talking about?" Devereaux smiled, a cold, calculating gesture. "Your father didn't die of a heart attack." "Mr. Riley," he was silenced. "By my associates because he threatened to expose Kronos." The revelation hit Ethan like a physical blow. Years of grief and suspicion crystallized into a burning rage. His father hadn't succumbed to a medical condition. He'd been murdered. A tense standoff ensued. Devereaux's security personnel moved to apprehend them. A chaotic struggle broke out, a desperate fight for survival in the heart of the control center. Maya, agile and resourceful, disabled security cameras and tripped alarms, creating a diversion. Ethan, driven by years of suppressed anger, fought with a ferocity he didn't know he possessed. He managed to reach a terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard, accessing Nightingale's core code. He remembered the vulnerabilities he discovered, the backdoors he intentionally left open. He began to rewrite the program, injecting a kill switch, a cascading virus that would unravel the entire system. "You can stop me," Devereaux snarled, watching his empire crumble before his eyes. "This is bigger than you, bigger than all of us." "It ends here," Ethan said, his voice unwavering. He activated the kill switch. Nightingale shuddered, then began to unravel, its complex algorithms collapsing into a chaotic jumble of code. The screens flickered, then went dark. The control center descended into silence. As the authorities arrived, alerted by the triggered alarms, Ethan and Maya slipped away, disappearing into the pre-dawn mist. They were fugitives wanted for questioning, their lives forever changed. Days later, hiding in a secluded cabin in the Pacific Northwest, Ethan received an anonymous message through an encrypted channel. A single line of text: "Nightingale is gone, but there are others. The architecture remains." He knew then that the fight was far from over. He exposed one conspiracy, but a vast network of surveillance programs, built on the same principles, likely remained hidden, waiting to be unleashed. The battle for privacy, for freedom, had just begun, and he, the son of a whistleblower, was now a soldier in that war.